Hi, this is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles, and I'm bringing you the show tonight from Cambridge, Massachusetts after some travels in Omaha and Denver. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving celebration. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, last week we had a quiet gathering at the place where my dad lives, west of Cambridge, west of Boston, and this was the first Thanksgiving without my mom, who passed away on August 6th. So there were just 10 of us, and we had enjoyed the food that the community where he lives provided, very tasty turkey and all the fixings, and it was good to be together, and we certainly were aware of the person who was missing for the first time. Mom always presided over pretty amazing Thanksgiving celebrations, guided in large part by my sister, who always had great ideas on things like asking the question each year. We'd go around the table at a certain point in the meal, and everybody would have to answer a question about what they were grateful for, or other things like that. So Mom and my sister Steph were good partners in making sure that our family celebrations were up to standards, and that was the case this year as well. Darlene and I headed off after Thanksgiving to Omaha, where our nephew Stephen married Kira in a home wedding at Darlene's brother Rod's house, and Connie, his wife, and it was great. Stephen was in his dress blues, and a small gathering of friends and family there. And afterward, we flew off to Denver for a couple of days, and that's where I recorded this week's interview with Dr. Robin Cook, who pretty single-handedly invented the medical thriller, and he has a new one out titled Genesis, which you'll hear about in the interview. Got some news to talk to you first, and then also some tech tips and other items before we wrap up the show. First up in news, I want to think out loud and share some thoughts with you about the Flash Briefings platform on Amazon Alexa. I've been experimenting that with my own new Flash Briefing morning journal each day. But I noticed that there was an improvement or some innovation in Google's version of this platform, mainly for news. It's called Your News Update, and this was announced in a blog post last month on the 19th of November by Liz Gannes, who is product manager for news at Google. And it was an interesting post because it was framing the innovation that Google was announcing about its news platform in terms of saying that the audio web now is like the text web of the 1990s, that it's difficult to find things, and because Google has such experience in search and dealing with news in text form, they are suggesting that they're now able to use some of those skills and competencies in helping people to curate news that is going to be tailored to their interests. As of the date of this news blog post last month, there are now two formats that you can use for having Google Assistant gather news for you. One is Your News Update, and that's the new one. It's described as a mix of top headlines and stories based on your interests that refreshes every time you play it. The standard one, which is the one before, is simply News Briefings. Shows that you select in the order you choose. Now, that one I think is more similar to the Flash Briefing system on Alexa, where you pick the news sources that you want to be drawn on whenever you say what's new or what's the news. And the Google one, I suspect, is giving a little more tailored or customized news if you do it. What I did to get to that format was I opened up the Google Assistant on my iPhone, and then there's a tab that's titled You. If you tap on that, and then you tap on News, and then down below you see News Playlist Format, and you can toggle that back and forth, so it's either that one, the new one, or the old one. This is what it sounds like. I'll just give you a feel for having set that and given a few indications of what I wanted to listen to. This is what I hear when I ask for the news. Hey, Google, what's the news?
Let's get started with your news update this evening. First up, Here are today's top headlines. This is the Associated Press.
I'm Mike Gracia reporting the White House won't take part in the next impeachment hearing. The White House indicates it will
Google,
not
stop. I've been experimenting with it tonight just to see what kinds of things get presented. I think one thing I like is that each time I tried asking for the news, you can say, hey, Google, play me the news, or hey, Google, what's new? I got different stories. Now, some of them were different outlets giving the same story, the top stories, but each time I asked for the news, I got a different mix of stories. That seemed kind of fresh and interesting. Then the other thing I noticed is it brought up a story that Amtrak had stopped or delayed, had temporarily stopped service on the line between here in Boston and New York because of a power outage. And I assume that was brought into my feed because Google knows I'm here in Cambridge, and maybe it knows that I do a lot of searching for Amtrak, that I ride Amtrak. And so that was a bit of news that was coming to me that it really did interest me. I think that's the power of what they're doing here, is that if without having to spend a lot of my time choosing which news sources I want to hear from, Google can prowl the web and at any given moment give me a selection of stories that I'll be interested in. That could be pretty interesting. They switch from shorter stories, like the one that was just going to be playing there about impeachment, to longer form stories. It seemed like I was getting 3 or 4 short ones, just a few minutes, and then there were stories that lasted 5 or 10 minutes. Interesting package. I haven't been able to find a way to upload my own content to Google News the way I have been uploading the morning journal briefings to the Alexa platform using the Blueprint capability. And I think I've heard that is in the works for Google, but they're pretty clearly not as far advanced in enabling a wide variety of content producers to take advantage of their voice platform, as opposed to the way Amazon is opening up the Alexa platform through Blueprint. Google calls it a smarter way to listen to the news, hosted by the Google Assistant. Google, I think, may have quite an advantage here, because one thing I've noticed is, although I'm, of course, very much a user of the Alexa platform, to take the time to go in and change the flash briefings that I'm getting is just, I'm not sure what my resistance to that is. It's too much work. It's like things are so easy, and when someone like Google comes in and says, we're going to be finding things that you might be interested in to share with you in an audio format, I think that if they have a lead in that kind of capability over Amazon, that's going to be significant. Now, the morning briefing that I've created has settled down after, I think I've been at it a couple of months now, and at first there was real latency when I would put up a post of these 2 to 5 minute posts in the morning using my iPhone. I could hear them immediately on my account, and then my father, who shares my account at his place, could also hear it. But anyone else who was simply enabling the skill, listening to it somewhere in the United States, it's only in the United States, sometimes the delays were up to almost a full day, so that the next morning I wasn't able to put up a new post because the old post hadn't sort of propagated onto the platform. And that was because there was human curation of every single post that I put up. And in working with the team for Blueprints, I was able to get past that. And just in the last few days, it appears that when I put one of these posts up, that it only takes about a half an hour for it to go live for anybody to listen to it. And that's a great improvement, because my whole concept of this was to do a morning, kind of a meditation, something like a journal entry, but speaking out loud and being mindful of the people who are listening each day. Some of you, I think, are listening to the podcast and have started listening to the Morning Journal, which is wonderful. And that I can put these up, and then within a half an hour, if you tune in to listen, and I'm generally trying to do it between 6 and 7 a.m. Eastern time. 6 or 7 a.m. wherever I am. If I'm in Denver, it's on Mountain Time. Then if you set your rhythms in the morning, have a cup of coffee and want to hear the Morning Journal, you would just add it as one of the flash briefings that you can listen to via Alexa. Very powerful new platform that I'm having a lot of fun exploring and trying to catch the rhythms that I want to present. I tend to be a little bit fresh and hopefully a little bit thoughtful and inspired first thing in the morning. And as I get up, usually Darlene's still asleep, I come up to my den and I sit for 10 minutes and then I record the morning journal. So they're my first spoken words of the day that I'm doing in this mode, and I'm not sending them into the void the way my written journal. Who's ever going to read my written journal? I don't know, but it's very pleasing to know that when I'm speaking these words, and I can picture some of the faces of those of you that I know are listening, and it's powerful, it's new, and I think part of the delight of something like this is to just imagine what the content might look like. What am I communicating to people in these very quick and relatively spontaneous communications that have become part of my daily practice. If you want to check out the Morning Journal, just search for Alexa Skills and then search for Morning Journal. That you can leave a review for it, which is helpful for other people to find it. And I really love reading the reviews that those of you that have done that so far have left. Cass and Gary, Peggy, Garrett, Todd, Daniel, and Brian. And so the more reviews that show up there, I think the more people might check it out. And the beauty of it is, compared with podcasts, there are so few of these to choose from that the first of us that are taking advantage of this flash briefing platform on Alexa, there's quite a bit of room. For one thing, I was able to get the name Morning Journal, which is a nice generic name. And if you search for Morning Journal, there you have it. The other thing I want to mention, and I'll have more to say about this in coming weeks, but I ordered an Amazon Studio. This is the big premium speaker that now has Alexa capability built in with a very high quality speaker compared with what was available before. And mine arrived. I had pre-ordered it. It costs $200. It's very similar in shape. I think it might be a little bigger than the Apple HomePod that I had, and it cost $299. When I attended the demonstration of the Amazon Studio in Seattle, along with all the other new products that were presented that day, the sound seemed huge. I was maybe sitting in the front row, and there were at least 100 media representatives there. The acoustics of that room, I think, may have been dramatic or well suited for it, but I was very impressed. When I fired up the Amazon Studio here in my cozy little den in Cambridge, it didn't have that boomy sound, and I guess I was a little bit underwhelmed compared with my expectations of that when I took this thing out of the box, there was going to be a very big sound. It's a very clear sound, and it's clearly a quality sound. And one thing I'll be doing in the coming days is to put the HomePod and the Amazon Studio side by side. I'll wish that I had the ears of my cousin Peter, who's blind and hears things that I just am not picking up. And it would be fun at some point to have him give a test of the audio sound of this. $100 less, that's good. It comes with Alexa, and it's a handsome device too. I have it on top of my Alexa microwave, and it plays nicely with the Echo Show that I have on my desk, so that only one of them will answer when I summon Alexa. And if I speak closer to the Echo Show, that's the one that answers. And if I speak closer to the studio, then that's the one that answers, and that's handy if I'm playing the music. If you've gotten an Amazon Studio and are listening to it perhaps with better trained ears than mine, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com. For the tech tip, I want to talk about the Amazon Smart Plug. There are a ton of plugs that you can use to turn on the lights in your house and do various things. I've had a few of them. I think I had a Wemo and a couple of other brands. When the Amazon plug arrived, I thought it was so much easier to set up that it really made it the one that was far preferable. They sell for $25, and I picked up one for $5 in either Black Friday or Cyber Monday. I forget which it was. It was when we were traveling. But I just figured, it's always good to have another one of these around. I have one here in my den set up to the light, so I can just say, Alexa, turn on the light, turn off the light. Another one I had set up with the Christmas tree, which we put up early. I can just say, Alexa, turn on the tree or turn off the tree. The setup, which if you buy one of these, you'll find the directions are drop dead simple, but it's very clever because once you have the Alexa app on your iPhone, you take the plug out of the box. The way I usually do it is I scan the little QR code on the device itself, and Alexa sees it, and then I plug it in to the wall, and it flashes blue, and when I do devices and then plus and then Amazon and then the plug, it all just instantly is recognized, and it comes up with a name like third plug or fourth plug, and you can go in and I can change it to light or tree depending on the device. This is really doable technology, and if you have an Echo device, a Dot or a Flex or any of the other Echo devices, so that it's within reach to be speaking to, it's very easy to tiptoe into the starting up of a smart home arsenal of technology. And I think once you try it, then you'll have other ideas and say, well, what if I had this set up and connected? And I know a lot of people are setting up the Christmas lights and seasonal lights with these. My daughter across the backyard here, they have their tree set up on the same basis. And the kids know how to do it. The 5-year-old and the 3-year-old can have Alexa turn on the Christmas lights, and they really enjoy doing that. Very easy to connect, and if you have waited to try one of these devices, especially if you keep an eye on the holiday deals that come through, if you see something for Amazon Smart Plug, I'd jump on it. Time now for the interview. Doctor and writer Robin Cook started his medical career as a general surgical resident and finished with an ophthalmology residency at Harvard. As of this week, he is the author of more than 30 international bestsellers and is credited with creating and popularizing the medical thriller genre with his novel Coma, which was published 40 years ago and was the basis for a very popular movie. His most recent book, Genesis, was released this week by G.P. Putnam's Sons. That's an imprint of Penguin Random House. And Wednesday, when I talked to him, that's when the book was released, and I visited with him by Skype. He was here in Boston, and I was back in Denver. As I edited the interview today, I heard a slight scratching sound. I think that might be Robin was using an inline microphone with his earbuds, so when he shifted position slightly, it generated a little noise. I hope you don't even hear it, but I did notice it when I was editing the interview. It was fun to be in Denver that day because we were delayed and stayed an extra day or so because there was a big snowstorm here in New England or in the Boston area. When I connected with him, I asked if Robin thought I was going to be able to make it back to Boston the following day.
Actually, I think Cambridge got a little bit more than we got in Boston for some reason.
Yeah, probably out to the west. Well, I appreciate talking with you. This is an important day. I see, by my count from your website, this looks like the 37th book that you've published. And,
Correct. Correct.
Have you, after this amount of time, developed any rituals or habits that go with the day one of your books is being released?
No, it's actually changed over the years. I used to do publicity tours, but after I went over my first 100 million, I decided not to.
Yeah, not as much purpose.
Right, and actually, it's not as efficacious as it used to be. It used to be, to do a publicity tour, every major city in the United States, you could go and there would be a morning TV show, a morning radio show, a newspaper, an afternoon TV show in every city.
Yeah.
And now that's completely gone.
Yeah. Well, you can reach a lot of people just from home today by doing things like this.
Exactly.
What is Genesis about?
It's a medical mystery thriller that deals with the issue here is forensics, and I got really excited about reading about how they caught the Golden State Killer in 2018, after he'd been on the lam for maybe 30 years or something like that. And they did it with ancestral DNA or genetic DNA. And I was aware of genetic DNA, but I just thought it was something for those people who were particularly interested in finding out if they're related to the Romanovs. But I wasn't. And until this happened, and then I got very interested and realized that because so many people have been doing it, now I think there's something like 15 to 20 million people now that have done it, that the library is large enough to cast a relatively large net out for people that would have some association with whatever the DNA is of someone. And so I decided it was probably a good time to do one of my thrillers about it, particularly because Jack and Laurie, who are recurrent characters, they're medical examiners, and they're interested in forensics. And what a better way to introduce them than to sort of have it forced on them in a certain sense, which is what happens in Genesis. They just don't expect it. In fact, the case that is really the central case is an opioid overdose, and they're very apt to declare that an accidental, that's what they call that, accidental death. And yet, because this woman who they're autopsying, who's supposedly an overdose, they find out that she's pregnant with a very, very small embryo. And that keys off with this resident that Laurie are doing the autopsy with. Because of her past, she doesn't like men, and she is immediately suspicious of where this woman's boyfriend is, who created this, and immediately thinks, well, what if he had something to do with her death? Maybe he supplied the drugs. So she says, I'm going to find this guy. And that's how the book really begins.
Well, that character, Dr. Aria Nichols, the resident who has an attitude toward men, you're a man, and I'm wondering, was it kind of fun to write about a character that hated our sex as much as she does?
Oh, yeah. And, I had a few people that I met in the past, girls that I met in the past, that I wanted to blame Nada instead of me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was fun. You know what I like? I like to create stories and create characters who make the story happen, rather than them being sort of dragged along. Because she wouldn't have done this if she didn't hate men.
Yeah.
And why does she hate men? Well, there's, her background story explains that. And so to me, it's much more realistic.
There's another issue that seemed to be raised on a secondary basis, that her personality makes her very difficult for everybody to get along with. Nobody likes her, and yet she's very bright. She's very competent in the work she's doing, and particularly in this case. In your experience in the medical profession, is that a common situation where somebody who can't get along with people, even patients, still is a remarkably effective physician or doctor just because of what they know?
No. But it's becoming more so. And the reason I say it that way is when I went to medical school, we were all kind of cookie cutter. We all looked about the same. Our backgrounds were fairly similar. But they're making a pretty big effort today to get more people into the medical arena not only in terms of minorities and gender. I mean, now it's just about, there were only like 4 or 5 women in my medical school class out of 130, I think we were. And now it's about even. And so is an attempt. Obviously, this Aria did well in her MCATs and her coursework in college in terms of chemistry, etc. You wonder, how did she get through the interview? Well, in actuality, I'm proposing that the interviewer or interviewees really thought that she, because of her background, because of her uniqueness, maybe should be more sensitive to people who have had the experiences she had. And that's how I explain that she became a doctor. And, she didn't even realize how much she disliked patients. Before you get into medicine, you think of it as more often as an intellectual kind of circumstance. You're going to be, dealing with illness, trying to make diagnoses, etc. You don't realize how immersed you have to get within people in most specialties. But some obviously are not, and pathology is one of them. You don't have to get along with patients because you don't have any contact with them, essentially.
I saw the TED Talk you gave at Wesleyan. Pretty fascinating arc to your writing career in your aspiration to write books, maybe a book that might have as much impact as Uncle Tom's Cabin or The Jungle in changing public perception about the medical profession, maybe even leading to public policy. At this point, as you look back on your work, do you have hopes for any particular book which you think you can already see that has had that kind of an impact on an issue that was important to you?
Not in terms of public policy, unfortunately. We've become so polarized politically that even changing public opinion is not necessarily going to change public policy at this point. But what I have done is had effect on public opinion, and that's been pretty sizable. Starting with Coma, one of my goals with
that was your first book. Not the first book, the first bestseller.
The first bestseller. It was my second book. One of the what I was trying to do with Coma, one of the things I was trying to do with Coma is to make people aware that hospitals are not a place that you should go.
If you're feeling tired.
Yeah, exactly. Hospitals, you should stay out of the hospital as much as you can. And if you do have to go in the hospital, you should bring an ombudsman, someone who's going to, check everything. What is it? Who's, because there's so many times when a nurse or someone comes down to give they're better at it now than they used to be, but to make sure that you're getting that, you're the one that's supposed to get that drug and whatnot. And if you have someone there who's sort of checking on things, that's much less likely to happen. But so I've affected public opinion. Unfortunately, I haven't had as much effect on public policy as I would like, because I've been trying to be for a public option or Medicare for all from my first days in medical school.
Really?
Huh. Yeah.
That's been quite a topic on the Democratic presidential nomination campaign so far. Do any of those candidates take a position which fits with how you see the way forward?
Well, I'm a realist, and the way our political system is now, because the Senate it's not really representative of the country, and that's not going to change very quickly. And that the Republicans are still adverse to the idea of government playing a very active role in healthcare, whereas I actually feel that that's one of the should be the pillar of government. I think the government should do defense, education, and healthcare. I mean, some level but so I don't see that. I was very disappointed in Obamacare that he had to drop the public option. Because to me, that was very important. I think that if we get a public option, there's no doubt in my mind is that it will eventually overtake. Because there's no way public insurance companies that exist to make a profit can compete with a system that is nonprofit. I mean, there's no way.
If it's run efficiently,
if it's run efficiently, yes.
Yeah, exactly. One book. Let's see. Which is the book where you had the smartphone app? Cell. Yeah. What was the name of the app? iDoc or something?
Yeah, I think so. iDoc.
Yeah, that was scary. I'm a great gadget guy, and have any apps appeared on available for your iPhone or Android phone that eerily recall what you were predicting in that book?
Yes and no. I mean, they are appearing now. I still think my premise in that book that the phone is going to become your primary care physician is still going to happen. There was a big setback in what was it called, Thermos, that company that was going to be able to do chemistries with a drop of blood. Because if that had been immediately been able to be combined with even what we can do now in terms of monitoring, that would have made it come to pass even faster. But the fact of the matter is that your phone, a constant companion, and to monitor whatever bodily function, physiological functions on a real-time basis is so much better than going to your doctor once a year to get your blood pressure taken,
right? And
whatnot, or even the phone interacting with you can tell you immediately when you've smoked a cigarette, or had a drink. You sure you want another one of those Negronis?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was a conference I went to, I think it was at Harvard Medical School a couple of summers ago, and it was all about people building skills for Alexa for medical purposes, and some interesting things for older people. My father's 92 and lives out in Concord, and the potential for a voice-activated access to AI and medical intelligence of one kind or another seems to be something that's coming. Is that a topic that you can imagine?
Oh, absolutely.
One of your fodder for one of your next thrillers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And with each of these, am I right that particularly because you're trained in medicine, there's always an opportunity paired with a risk of abuse or danger? Is that how all this medical technology looks to you?
Yes. Like last year's book, Pandemic, was about CRISPR-Cas9. There's no doubt that it has enormous promise, but at the same time, there is peril. And I think to write a thriller, you're not going to write the thriller about the promise. You have to write it about the peril.
Right.
And so that's what the origin of Pandemic was about.
Yeah. I noticed that your first book, which you wrote underwater when you were in a submarine,
right,
and you had quite a mission there to talk about reform that needed to take place in training of doctors. It's the only book, I think, that isn't available in Kindle format. And I've wondered, have you ever thought about getting Putnam's to release a Kindle version of it so that it might find a new generation of readers, even though you hadn't quite discovered the formula for bestseller success at that point? There was still, sounds like, a pretty strong message in that book.
Yeah, and it still is cogent today. It's a little bit better today than it was then for a number of reasons, but it is something that still goes on because medicine is really, it's very obvious it's a team sport.
Yeah.
But but the way we train our doctors, we still subject them to enormous amount of competition among themselves. Little less so now in residencies, because residencies are no longer pyramidal. Do you know what that means?
No.
A pyramidal residency is that the first year surgery, they accept 15, second year 10, third year. In other words, each year they winnow down. Yeah. So you have to compete against your fellow resident in order to stay in the program. And that's very bad in terms of getting along with your colleagues, etc. And but it's still true to get into medical school. And then in medical school is tremendous competition, a sense of competition. Yeah. You're competing. It's not just to do well. It's you have to do better than the next guy. Mm-hmm. And so it's still an interesting and important issue, I think. And I actually didn't know that it was not available on a Kindle edition. I wonder if it's available as an ebook.
I doubt it. If it's not on Kindle, I wouldn't think, because the other formats are pretty well fallen away, the Nook and the Kobo. Well, Kobo's big overseas, but yeah, it'd be a natural Kindle book. And depending on the rights, somebody like Open Road, which specializes in ebooks, I'm sure would love to take it on, or Amazon Publishing or something. But if you've got the freedom to do something with it, I think you could probably give that one another run without having to kill any trees.
Well, in actuality, my agents, Trident agency, is very up on all this sort of stuff, and they just had me in and talking me into actually doing my own ebooks.
Oh, great!
So I might start doing that.
So that you would be creating original work that would be strictly for ebook going forward?
No, it'd be my backlist.
Oh yeah, your backlist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I might actually do that.
Yeah, that would be great. You know, they have this thing called Kindle in Motion, and some of your plots, I would think, would lend themselves. It's almost a kind of animation, but it can really make an ebook exciting, especially if you read it on an iPad or something that has some color on it, and you see these creepy things happen where, the guy is slipping the stuff into the syringe and getting, off the patient or something. But if you experiment in that realm, I'm sure you'll find all kinds of creative opportunities.
Wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Well, it's something I'm not going to want to spend too much time on, because I'd rather put it into the next project.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But if there's some things, like, for instance, you say that You're the Intern is not even available, I'd be really interested in getting that available.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Can you say now anything about your next book? They come out pretty regularly. There's something coming out in 2021?
Yes. I'm actually, should be out in 2020.
Oh,
just a year from now.
Yeah.
I've been on this kind of schedule. I like having the book come out in early December so it can be available for the Christmas holidays, etc. I think it's a good time. Well, as I have been talking about, I'm becoming even very much more attuned to this conundrum of getting healthcare in this country changed. And so I think I did write a book one time about health insurance. It was called Marker. Uh-huh. And it was about the fact that people who had markers for chronic disease, meaning that they were going to be developing chronic disease. In that book, an organization who works for health insurance company decides to find out these people that have these specific markers and get rid of them.
Ooh.
So, they don't want to have lifelong chronic disease. They want to get rid of those patients. And so that was one. I think that I could write another novel about how the idea of health insurance and making profit is sort of contrary to healthcare, and get people to really understand exactly why.
You could do for that business what Sinclair did for meat packers.
Right. Wouldn't that be nice?
That'd be a nice cap to a long and purposeful career. That's great. Congratulations on the new book. I have a niece who is a nurse up in Montana, and I was telling her, well, I'm just reading this guy's book, and I think if you like thrillers and to be entertained and informed, I think she would probably understand some of those sections a lot better than I did. Because you're not afraid to get right down into the details of some of the medical issues.
No, not at all. And I think my readers like it, actually. I really do. And I think, actually, I'm excited about this book. I think it's going to be an extremely popular book. It's a fun issue. Those 15 to 20 million people that have already done this Ancestry DNA, they're going to have fun with it, and other people too. I think it's going to be a very popular book. It's, last year's book was about CRISPR-Cas9. That's a pretty sophisticated, and a lot of people, even if I try to explain it well, it's still relatively difficult. But this is not difficult.
Now, what's that term? You just said a term I don't know about. What is it? Give me the short version of that. The CRISPR-Cas?
CRISPR-Cas9. That's that gene editing technique, the new gene editing technique. That's what my last year's book, Pandemic, was about. So the peril, it has wonderful promise. Within a very short period of time, all genetic diseases are going to be within the realm of perhaps cure with this CRISPR-Cas9. It's very accurate and easy, and you can do it in your own garage. Yeah. But obviously there's peril too. So,
well, since you've spent so much time, bringing to light in a literary way the perils of the. Are you terrified to end up at Mass General, even though it's maybe one of the best hospitals in the world, just because of what you know and what you've written about?
I hope I end up at Mass General instead of some other hospital.
Right.
We're all going to be patients. I think that's why my books are particularly interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're all going to be patients at some point, and we'd like the experience to be as best possible. And we want to feel it when we go into a hospital or we have a company that's providing our health insurance, that they really have our best interests at heart.
Yeah. Well, you're probably helping that to be, if lots of people who are working at Mass General are reading your books, that's maybe a comfort.
Well, they did have to, when Coma came out, they did have to get rid of operating room number 8. This was just operating room number 8, and in the Mass General, they had to get rid of it
There's no 13th floor in our building here in Denver, so there's no operating room number 8, huh?
I think there is now, but back then when Coma came out for the first year or so, that no one wanted to go in operating room number 8.
That's good. I have been speaking with Dr. Robin Cook, author of a new medical thriller titled Genesis, released today by G.P. Putnam's Sons. Thanks very much, Doctor.
My pleasure.
That's it for this week. My hopes of talking to someone from the Alexa team about the new different kinds of emotional shading to the Alexa's voice ran up against schedule problems with the team at Amazon, but I think we will hear from them in the next few weeks. It leaves me with a scheduling challenge for next week because Darlene and I are leaving Tuesday night for Europe. We'll be flying to London, then on to Malta and Germany. A 10-day trip that's timed for the wedding of our niece in Fussen, Germany. But I need to get somebody to talk to on Monday and get the show up by Tuesday, or at least the major work of it done. I might end up putting it onto the internet Thursday in Malta, if that's right. So I get a little scrambling to do. And I will probably do some kind of a recording for the show for the following week, which I'm not sure if I see somebody reading a Kindle on a train in Germany, I might be talking to them. It'll be a chance for some creativity to bring you some news from the road of our travels. And I'll bring a kind of a light version of my recording gear so that I can do that. And as always, I will have to I'll have to just be efficient. I'll have to do something that doesn't take up a whole day when Darlene would like to be out touring someplace and I'm staying by Wi-Fi. And I think I did a pretty good job in that when we were in Ecuador a few years ago. I had a very light rig. I was mainly using my iPhone and managed to get up 2 or 3 shows while Darlene and her sister Deb and I were traveling through Ecuador for 6 weeks. So I have a kind of a dim memory of exactly what the gear was and how I did it. But sometime between now and Tuesday night, I'll have to figure out how all that works. So next week, a mystery guest, and the week after that, the Kindle Chronicles will be emanating from somewhere in Europe. Thanks for listening, and I'm thankful for the chance to talk to you, and hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll talk to you next week.